What is up, guys? Welcome to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TWA Motorsports, and today, yes, today is the day we are going to be dropping the Yukon, right? The new to us Yukon that we bought for my wife as a daily driver and us as a family hauler. Guys, we've already done a few things that I've showed you some videos on. Obviously, we put some 24-inch wheels on it. Guys, we've been driving this thing for about a week with those on it and no complaints. They seem to balance out okay. And even my tire guy said they balance good. Definitely a different look, that's for sure. I like the size, but right now it looks really goofy with the stance. So we're gonna fix that today. Also, obviously we debadged the whole thing and we got the windows tinted, including the entire front windshield. So it's looking better, and even though it's really dirty right now. This is the first day we've had without rain. As you can see, I pulled the truck out, the trailer out. This is a little bit different, but I wanted a little more room to work on this. So what we are going to be doing today, guys, is a complete drop. I don't know exactly how much we're gonna get as far as drop goes, but we're gonna go around and measure it first. I'm gonna talk about the measurements after I get them. I'll measure them off camera and then tell you guys. And then we'll kind of dial in what we want as far as ride height, because we're gonna be using some different stuff. But I wanna show you, even though I've got a ton of junk piled up here, I wanna show you kind of what we're dealing with. Guys, there's a lot involved in this, and we're trying some stuff that we have never tried before that I'm really excited about. So for one, the big difference that we're going to be using on this versus the ones that we've done in the past is we are going to use a Ride Tech coilover setup in the front. So we got the coils there. We've got the threaded front struts. I don't remember which ones is which. So it's very similar to what I just put on my crew cab truck, and I'm really, really excited about it. Of course, we've got 2-inch drop spindles from Beltec. Guys, I will list all of this stuff in the description down below. We've got the DJM relocation kit for the back. We are actually going to put an adjustable panhard rod. You can see that up top there. And then we are going to try, guys, I was looking for a 6-inch rear spring, a 6-inch drop spring. These are an eBay one. I'm going to link that in the description. Guys, if you want to try them, this will be the first time I've tried these. Now, to go inside of those, we've got some helper bags. And the other cool thing about this Yukon, it is not, guys, this is not a mag ride vehicle. So if you have mag ride, you're gonna have to bypass the struts and the shocks, and you're gonna have to bypass the ride height sensor. But this doesn't have any of those, which is kind of exciting. It is 4-wheel drive, but let's get started in the back, because we do have to make some clearance in the back, and that is where we're gonna start. I'm not gonna show you guys that on camera, but I am gonna show you kind of the process in and out, because it wrecks my lens. But let's get a measurement where it sets right now on nice and level ground, and then we will know what we are dealing with as we go along. So just before we get started, guys, I'm going to chalk the front wheels. We're gonna get the back wheels off, obviously the back tires off the ground, because we're gonna be cutting. But look at what we've got. It's actually kind of crazy. So the driver's side front, 35 and 11/16, passenger side front, 35 and 13/16. So it's pretty close, within what, 1/8 of an inch, right to left. But the back, the driver's side rear at 37 3/4 and the passenger side rear at 38 3/16. That's a pretty substantial variance. And I mean, look at the gap right there. It's absolutely insane. But let's get to these wheels and tires off, at least on the back. And that's where we're gonna start, is back here in the back. Wanted to show you the setup here. I have put the jack stands up where the frame starts to thicken back up, right in front of the control arm. You can see the control arm there. And I've still got the jack under there, but what I've done is relieved all the pressure on the rear end. So it's down as far as it can go and still all be hooked up. Now we can get the wheels and tires off. That's gonna give me ample room to get to what we need to get to. Now, in order to get the additional travel that we need, guys, we are going to have to cut this bracket off. And so what I like to do is, this is part of the frame up top. And so I like to kind of scribe a line. Generally, you can do it in the dirt of where this goes. And we need to take this entire piece off in order to have the clearance that we need. So what I like to do is I use my grinder, and this is why I wanted to relieve the suspension as much as possible. As a matter of fact, it may not hurt if you don't have enough room to take the shock loose at the bottom, and that'll give it even more as far as like drop. But we need to get our grinder, which I'm gonna use my wireless or my cordless grinder, my DeWalt grinder, and a cutoff disc, and we're gonna cut this right here. And look, guys, it's kind of a problem because I don't like to grind over my head, and you have a spring right here. So what and look, we're taking those out, but what I like to do is I like to cut through this and then cut as far back as I can go on the sides, and then I cut a relief cut here in the center, and I'll try to cut in and show you guys. And what this allows me to do is get my pry bar and bend this down and then reach in and cut. That way I'm not laying on my back cutting over my head. I just hate doing that. So now, if you want to, you could take a grinder and pull all this off as well. But guys, I am not going to spend the time to take that off. I never do. Some people do like to do that, but in my opinion, it's just not worth the extra effort. What we're gonna do is get this entire piece out of the way so we have way more travel than if we were to just replace the bump stop. And then a lot of times, I'll go ahead and take the bump stop out. We can use this screwdriver that I've got here. It's not gonna hurt anything. We'll get the bump stop out of the way. And then I'm also going to use my tool here to pull this out of the frame like that. And then I'm going to use my flathead screwdriver to get this guy open. And then we are going to zip tie this kind of up against the shock so it's out of the way and doesn't accidentally get cut through. Now you can see what I've done with just my grinder. Make sure you use some sort of protection as far as to cover your eyes. I've cut a couple relief cuts, and you can see I've followed this line, and I've went into this bracket back here. This side's the easier side because the gas tank's on the other side, but I'll go over and show you guys that here in a little bit. But what I've done is I've cut back as far as I can cut here. This piece is actually not connected on the bottom, so we don't have to cut back there. But now I can use my pry bar, pry this down all the way across with these relief cuts. If you don't cut these relief cuts, guys, you're gonna have issues trying to bend it because it doesn't want to bend as easy if you don't. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pry this down, and then we'll be able to reach back in and cut the back. What I don't like to do, guys, is I like to keep this kind of uniform. So if you want to use a measuring stick to measure this, we're probably quite a ways down from the frame, but I would rather be too far down than go into the frame, if that makes sense, because this is just sandwiched around the frame from the factory. So chances are we'll have a little ridge, but that ridge can be always cut to fit after, instead of don't go too deep. So if you go too high here, you're gonna get into the frame and cause yourself some problems. And yeah, you don't want to cut into your frame. This is not part of the frame. So we're gonna pull this down and get it trimmed off, and then I'll try to cut in and show you guys as I'm doing that as well. You can see the pry bars that I've got. Got a small one to get it started, and then a big one to put a bunch of leverage on. But you can see I cut a piece off of this back here because it kind of is interfering with me bending this down. But you can see what I'm talking about. Relief cut, relief cut, relief cut, and we've got it bent to the spot that I kind of need it. I still can't get back behind. Guys, if you want to take your spring out at this point, you can. Look, life would be a lot easier if I did that, but I'm still not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim each piece of this off. So normally if you can get it bent far enough back, then you can reach back in there and cut the back side. But what I'm going to do, so I don't have to get under the car, is I'm going to cut this across, this, and this, and get that out of the way. And then I may be able to bend it a little bit additionally to get the backside, but just wanted to kind of cut back and forth in and show you guys what was going on. Let's catch up on where we're at. As you can see, guys, I took the spring out. This little pocket back here, I had trouble getting back to cut that without the spring being moved. So what I did was I took the 21 millimeters out of both of the shocks in the back here. So you can see those guys down there. And then I relaxed the rear end again. So lifted it up, took the 21s out, relaxed the rear end, and once I did that, then the spring just comes right out. But you can see our pile of what we removed. I had to cut it out in multiple pieces. I don't remember this being on the other ones. I did cut into that, but now I'm gonna grind it down, making it look a lot nicer. Like I said, guys, you could go back and pull all this off if you wanted. I just don't see the point in that. But you can see how much more clearance that we have. And you can also see where the frame lies because it's sandwiched in here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to clean these edges up, and then I'm gonna put some like paint on it or any kind of rubberized undercoating, whatever you got available. We'll get that on there, and then I will show you on the other side kind of how I approach it since the gas tank's in the way. The bracket is shaped a little different, but when we get over to that point, I'll show you this once we're all complete again, but then we'll go over to the other side kind of midway through the process and show you kind of how I combat the fact that the gas tank's right there. Just got through grinding this, making it nice and smooth, at least my edges. Guys, you can run it up to the complete frame if you want to. Here's the deal though. We're gonna be putting a bump stop down here later in this actual hole right here. So you're not gonna really gain anything by going even with the frame. I mean, I've got maybe a 1/16 of an inch showing where that piece is sandwiched around here. So I don't think we're gonna have any issues, but I did, like I said, coat it real quick because you don't wanna leave it, you know, open to the elements. We drive this thing in the rain. So anyway, we're gonna move on to the other side. I told you I'd show you this. We're gonna move to the other side. And when I get to the point where the gas tank becomes an issue, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the spring out just to give me additional room over there as well. But when I get to the point where the gas tank's an issue, I'm gonna cut in and show you guys what I do. So I'm down to the last piece here, but I wanted to show you guys, like I said, on the gas tank side, I like to put a piece of metal up in there to give me some additional, basically leeway from getting into the tank. The tank's plastic, but guys, you would melt through it relatively quickly. So use a piece of steel. That's what I've got, an extra piece of steel in there. And so I'm almost finished. I've been cutting, you know, and then pulling it out, making sure that we haven't went through it. You can kind of see because it's white. That's another reason why I like to use this piece. But that just kind of blocks you from getting into the tank. The tank's relatively close there. So I'll do the same thing when I'm grinding. I'll leave that piece there, but I'm almost finished. This side actually was a little bit easier because it didn't have that bracket on the back. Now that we've got what they call the free travel mod complete on both sides, the other side actually, guys, to me seemed a little easier. But either way, we've got, we're gonna move on. And so because of the amount of drop we're gonna do, and people ask me this all the time, do you have to have this? Yes, guys, if you're going more than, let's say 4 inches or more, you need to do this. What this does is this relocates your lower control arm down here, so you have better angles on what the way the suspension should be set up. Because what happens is when we lower this, the control arm, the lower control arm that you see here, is then completely facing up, and it needs to be more parallel. And so what this does is it relocates it. So in order to put this thing in, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to sit, basically it sandwiches in just like that. And we are going to take our 21 millimeter out on this and push that thing up into place. We will retain the original bolt for the control arm on the bottom, but it comes with new bolts for the top. Now these are not side specific. You can see they have 2 holes in them, and that's so they can fit on either side. And so what we'll do is I'm gonna go ahead and get this 21 loose. We'll sandwich that guy up into place. We'll get the bolts started, but before I actually put it up into place, I want to use this time that the control arm's out of the way to put my bump stop in right there. See that pre-existing hole? That is where we're gonna put our bump stop in. And so, in my opinion, guys, this is the best time to do it. Otherwise, you're trying to sneak a wrench up in there to hold the backside of your bump stop, and it's kind of an issue. So this is a good time to do that. So let's get this 21 millimeter out right here. Let this kind of relax. You may have to loosen the front in order to get it to relax. That's not a big deal. I'm not gonna tighten this up until we get some weight on the suspension anyway. So let's get that kind of up into place, and then I'll show you my bump stop as well. Now, because of the way this is oriented, you're not going to be able to pull it down enough if you do not loosen this front one. So it's 21 also. So just loosen it. You don't have to take it out, but just loosen it. So now you can see what I'm talking about here. We've got the room. We can put this guy into place. And so how this will work is, like I said, it sandwiches around, and then there's a threaded insert that the kit comes with. We'll just set it there for now, and I'll show you. So this threaded insert goes on the top, and then you're going to use one of these 3 bolts. You've got 2 that are fine thread, so it's the coarse threaded one that you see that you're going to be using. So you'll set this on the top of this guy right here, and then we're going to use a washer and a lock washer to thread this in the bottom. Now I've loosely got this set into place, as you can see, with a threaded piece on the inside here, and our washer and lock nut, or lock washer going in. Got it started. Same thing here. I've just got these pushed through. But guys, here's my bump stop, and I'll list it in the description. It's actually from McGoy's, but it sets right there, just like that, in that factory hole. And then of course we have a lock washer, and it is a 9/16 to tighten that up. So I'm gonna go ahead and snug that up. I'm gonna put our washers on this. I just set this into place to get it started. And then we're gonna snug these up too. Now there's no torque specs on this, guys, but just get them good and tight. Now I went ahead and did this on both sides. Here's gonna be your issue once you do this. You're going to have issues putting your control arm back in place. It's not gonna line up. Let me show you here. See that? How far off we are?
So what I'm doing, guys, is I'm using a jack. What happens is when you undo both sides at the same time, your rear end rolls backwards. It's only connected with this top piece here. Now, we don't want to mess with that, but what we want to do is I'm going to lift just barely. You can see I've got another jack under the drive shaft, and when I lift that, that's rolling that rear end forward. I don't know if you guys can see that. And what we're going to do is we're going to do that until we can get our bolts lined up down here at the bottom. I'm going to put them back in the same way they came out, with a threaded end pointing this way, and we're using the factory bolt that you see right there. I actually lied to you guys. They supply another bolt because your factory one isn't long enough. So I've got a washer on the other side, a nylock. I've just got those snugged down until they stopped. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and relieve the pressure on the jack. We'll get it out of the way. That was just to move that rear end forward so we could get that back into place. So at this point, we're going to move on to the shocks. Now, guys, this is a little bit of a reach up here. You're going to need a 21 millimeter, and you can get on the back side. I'm going to use a wrench on the front side. We're going to get the shock completely out of the way because the shock kind of impedes on us getting to the sway bar end links, which we're also going to have to take loose. Probably wouldn't hurt to spray some WD-40 on that. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to get the 21 millimeter out, get the shock completely out of place. We're still loose at the bottom, but we need to get the top loose. Now that we've got the shock out, so you can sneak the bolts out from back here, and I didn't have to take the inner liner out. You don't have to do that. You can see that I've already got the sway bar end leak off on this side, but guys, here's the deal. The top and the bottom, well, the top of it's 18 millimeters. So like on this side here, you can see I've sprayed it, but 18 millimeter up top, but this doesn't have an 18 millimeter. So what I'm using is a 3/4 to hold this sleeve on the inside to keep this from spinning, or you could use, I think it's a 6 millimeter that goes in the end. So either way, but let's get this sway bar end link out of the way. You can see we've got the sway bar end link out now. The other place, guys, make sure that these 10 millimeters that hold the sway bar, spray on the top side of those. A lot of times water sets in those and they get rusty. We're gonna have to loosen those and actually relocate one. So make sure that you spray those with some WD-40. But for now, I completely forgot. We're gonna move on to the, we're gonna relocate the shock. So there's shock relocation brackets that come with this DJM hardware kit. And I'm gonna go ahead and grab all the hardware for that and get those started. Take a look at this relocation bracket for the shock. It's pretty self-explanatory. It sandwiches around where the stock shock would normally mount. And instead of using a sleeve here to keep from collapsing this, they actually use 2 separate bolts. And so these are all 3 the same size. You've got one that comes up through the hole in the bottom, and we're gonna pull that snug like this, tighten it first. And these can go ahead and be tightened because they don't have any bushings. You don't have to worry about that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna snug these up until they're tight. All 3 of those, but you just put this around the old shock opening, thread the bolts in, and tighten them up. And that's all there is to relocating the shock. This gets it back into geometry and also allows for an additional amount of travel, even though we are going to be using a lowering shock. Now that we got these snugged down on both sides, we're going to move on to taking the panhard rod off. I know that not a lot of people replace this, guys, but we need to see if we can pop this clip loose. I think I can get it off here. But we need to get this off because this holds the brake line, and obviously we're not going to be able to do that anymore. I think I'm going to need a bigger screwdriver, aren't I, to get that off. But I just need to get that clip around this. I got one side. But once we get this off, and we're not going to be reusing it, so I mean the clip, I don't really want to break it, but at the same time, if it breaks, it's not an issue. We're gonna have to zip tie it to the new one because it's not shaped the same way. But once we get this off, we got 2 of these to break loose. Man, this is tough with one hand. Oh, there we go. So once we got that loose and the other one loose, then we need to take our 21 millimeter out that's going to hold this guy in place. And we're going to grab our adjustable one that we're going to be replacing this with. I may also have to take this 13 millimeter out. I don't know. We'll just see how much slack we have and when we're going back together if we need to move it. Now that we have this old nasty stamped stock one out, you can see our new replacement. And so why are we using this? Well, guys, we're going a little lower on this one than we normally do. And because of that, a lot of times when you lower something with the panhard rod, it kicks the rear end out to one side or the other. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to realign that by adjusting this center mount. Now,
you can undo these jam nuts and then run that in and out to make it longer or shorter. And you want to, I've already set it, I've already loosened those jam nuts and they're still loose. We'll tighten them after a while, but we want to do a couple things. One, we want our grease fittings facing down so we have the access to them. And then I'm going to put a little grease on the ends of those for when we put it up into place, but we're going to reuse the factory bolts and adjust it out to the same length as this one. That'll give you a good starting point. But this will be on the car adjustable, so we'll be able to roll under it and adjust it, and we'll talk about how we're going to measure that later on in the video. But let's get this guy back into place. I got that back into place using the factory hardware, as you can see. Guys, I did adjust it the wrong way. You need the grease zerk, the fitting, to face down on this side and up on the other side. The other thing is it doesn't really matter which side you put the adjustable end on. So obviously it's closer to one side or the other. To me, I thought it made a little more sense here because the spare tire kind of impedes on you adjusting it. You know, it doesn't matter which way you put it though. Just make sure that you're able to get to your grease fittings. There's a hole in that one over there you probably could get to, but I thought it'd be a little easier to face it up on that side. So we've got that in there. Same situation, guys, since it really needs to be torqued down with a load on the suspension. The other thing is we're obviously gonna have to zip tie our old e-brake cable to it once we get it set. I'm not gonna worry about that right now. Now we're gonna move on to our fittings that actually hold our new sway bar end links. So I'm just gonna hook the bottom one, or sorry, the top ones up for now. But you do need to put, the grease fittings come separately. As you can see, we are retaining the stock top for the stock bolt for the top one. So that is the stock bolt that we're gonna be putting back in there. And then for the bottom, we're gonna have to use what they supplied, which you can see. But guys, they are a little bit different shaped. So let's take a look at the shape of these things. You have a driver and a passenger side. So if you look at their instructions here that are hidden, driver side is the one with less of an angle. So this guy here will be your driver side, just like the picture you see. And the passenger side will be this one. But we can go ahead and screw our grease fittings in, and I'll put a little bit of coating on these as well. And we'll get, I'm not gonna put it on the bottom yet, but we'll put it on the top. Now, unfortunately, just putting those in doesn't solve our problem because we have to move the sway bar over just a little bit in order to line back up. Okay, we need to move it over an inch actually. So, and a lot of people ask, why do we need to do this? Well, first of all, guys, you need shorter end links. And this is trying to keep it away from any components that it might hit ultimately, including like the sway bar. As you can see, we would be really close if we had the factory one in there. And we've got the suspension all the way relaxed right now. So I'm not gonna hook this up just yet, but I am gonna go ahead and loosen our 10 millimeters that hold this in place. I'm just gonna loosen this side. We have to take the other side completely out because the sway bar has to come over 1 inch from where it's at now. We're gonna have to drill 2 new holes. Once we have that side loose, as you can see, this side is completely taken off. We need to, you see the 2 holes that originally held this thing. We need to mark over 1 inch and we need to drill 2 new holes because that's how far this guy needs to move over. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I'm just gonna use a step drill bit. Guys, we need to get a 3/8 inch hole and try to use a smaller one. You're gonna run into this up top sometimes. So let's get it marked and new holes drilled. Once you get those holes drilled 1 inch over, you can see the originals and the ones that I drilled. They supply you with a new bolt that goes through here and washer and a locking nut. They're 9/16. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and put our D-ring back up into place and snug that down. Or at least, I don't know if we're gonna snug it down yet actually, because we're gonna have to move the sway bar back and forth. So we're just gonna get them started. We'll worry about snugging them down here after we get the spring into place. We're ready for the spring. And as you can see, we are going for a substantial amount of drop here. These springs are made in the way where there's really no up or down, at least these aftermarket ones that I have. Same way with the stock ones, you could see what was the top. There's an isolator there. We're not gonna be reusing that, but what I am gonna be using is I am gonna use the stock top and bottom plate. Now, normally, guys, you've seen in the other videos where I've done this, I ditch those because that's generally worth another 1/2 inch of drop. This is a 6-inch drop spring. I'm not exactly sure what we're gonna be dealing with. So for now, I'm gonna put them back in place. This one on top, the big one on top here, as you can see,
and you can line it up. And then the bottom one, same situation. Now, before we do that, I've got my bag sitting out there in the sun trying to warm up, because those bags, we have to fold up and get into the center of this. Now, generally what you do is you take the cap off the top, and you can kind of fold them up. Sometimes you have to put them in hot water to get them pliable enough to slide through the upper piece here. That's the hardest part, to get them through there. But once they're in there, it's not too bad. And we're also gonna run some tails off of them with the airlines already attached, because we kind of have to thread that through all at one time. But once I get them assembled, I will show you guys what you're looking at. And of course, like always, guys, I'll be listing not only the bags, but the springs and all this stuff in the description below. I've got these folded up now. And actually, I didn't have to get them, normally I have to put them in hot water, but had them sitting out there in the sun. Still was a fight, but you can fold them up and push them into the spring. It's a fight, though. I will recommend using hot water. I just didn't want to go in and do it. But once I did that, there is a lock. It slides over a barb fitting. What I did, guys, is you could see I've got the other one sitting over there. I measured out this line, cut it exactly in half. We're going to put that valve somewhere back here in the back, I assume. And actually, there's two separate valves in this kit, but I'm going to put the T in line. There's also a T. We're just going to tee them off and have them both ran to the T. But we've got this in place. I'm going to put this in when we go together. But at this point, you're going to run this through. There's an opening up above where the spring mounts. So there's a hole in the center. So we're going to route that through, and then we'll worry about routing this out of the way of all the other junk as we go. I'm going to just get the spring in, kind of lift the rear end into place, and make sure that everything seats properly. Now, I will tell you, at the bottom of the spring, so where this guy's going to set, you want to try to make sure that that's even on both sides. So if the opening is here on the driver's side, it needs to be in the same place on the passenger side. That just gets you a uniform fitment as far as like the way the spring sets in the pocket. I've got both the springs setting, and I don't know if you guys noticed, but see, the opening is on this side on the bottom, and it's the same on the other side. If you keep those in the same spot, that means the spring is set the exact same way, and you won't have any variance in the way it sets. I also like to have that opening towards the back. I don't know, it's just my preference. That's the way the factory sets it. So what I'm going to do is, my wife's out here, I'm going to have her lift the jack from the center differential, and I'm going to make sure that the top goes into place as we're going up there. You know, the old ones, even with the springs or the shocks loose, we had to kind of pry them out. These, you know, you got a gobber room here. This is why it helps to have two people out here. So what she did was, she was lifting, okay, slowly. And generally, guys, one side goes up a little quicker than the other, because you don't have your jack generally all the way balanced. So if that's the case, while somebody is lifting it, the bottom pocket's not going to move, right? Once we set the spring on the perch, it's not going to move. But the top, you have to center it in the opening up top, and there's a piece in the center that it has to line up with. I wish I could show you guys. I probably should have before I did this, but if you have somebody lifting it up, you're sliding back side to side, making sure that the spring is centered. So at this point, the spring is centered, and we have pressure on it, so it's not going to move or go anywhere. We're going to keep that pressure on it right now. And then what I did was I thread the line through there, and like I said, we'll worry about getting it routed where it needs to go later. But since it's in place, what I can go ahead and do, I can swing this guy up, and I can get my bolt in place on it. So I gotta move it over, as you can see, and then we will get the bolt that comes with the kit installed, and we're just gonna loosely fit it up in there. You can see that it's still loose on the D-ring there, but I'd like to go ahead and get this in place. At this point, ready to put the shocks in the back, but guys, look, I put the one in on the other side and ran into a little bit of an issue. So we're not quite wide enough, so I had to use some washers as spacers. These guys here, I just found a washer that was actually the same size as the center. Actually, it's a little bit smaller, but it fits the bolt. Now, in order to put these RideTech shocks in place, you have these sleeves. You can see them here. There's two different kinds, right? So there's kinds that fit. Let me see if I can hold this up with my feet and show you. So there's a kind like this that actually fits in the center. And that's for if you need them to move, right? So we don't need these to move because of the way they're made. So they send you these
And these actually mount like this, so it makes it more like a bushing. And so that's the ones I'm using. Now, the problem being that I can't get this to snug up. So you can see the washer pack. I've got 3 washers on each side on the bottom, 2 on each side at the top. And I went ahead and snugged this down. Now, one other issue that I ran into, which is kind of odd, is the bottom of the shock here is wanting to hit this upper portion of the shock relocator. So what I ended up doing was I took my grinder and just ground that down just a little bit. Still have ample support. I don't have any fear that they're going to break or anything, but I just had to take a little bit of material off the top. Now I've already sprayed them and I've been letting them set, but guys, look, if you don't do that and you're using this same shock, see how close it's built to the bottom? The bottom of your shock is going to try to smash in between this, and you do not want that. We don't want to crack this. This is just aluminum. So sometimes it doesn't fit the way it's supposed to, and you got to make provisions, and that's kind of where we're at right now. Well, after a little bit of a fight on the spacers and the bolt in the bottom, you can see I used 3 washers on the bottom. I used 2 on each side of the top. So the bushing that they send is not quite wide enough. So I'd rather them send a bushing that was the right size, but guys, look, sometimes you just got to work with what you get. And so what I've done is I went ahead and snugged these down. I got them pretty tight. We'll probably go over them again and torque them once we're finished. And then I went ahead and hooked these lines back up. Since they're out of the way at this point, we don't have anything else to do. The other thing is I routed the air lines to the bags. They come up through that middle hole, and you can see I've got them kind of tied off in the back, but what I did was I just put them up above the frame rail and zip tied them to any lines that were up top. And so now I just need to find a spot to put the valve back here. I think I'm going to put it on the bottom for now. I was looking at the gas tank opening, and I could put it here, but there's just not a whole lot of room. I don't want it to be right here where it can get broken off going in, and I don't have the ability to get up top here. So for now, I think I'm just going to put it in the back. We may add a compressor down the road. I don't really see the need in it, but I don't know, we may do that. But I'll show you where I put the fitting. I'm going to go ahead and button the rest of this up. I need to zip tie our e-brake cable here to the panhard rod, and we can't adjust that until we get the wheels on and the suspension settled. So you kind of get the idea at this point. I'm gonna go ahead, button the rest of this stuff up, get all these lines hooked up, and then I'll kind of show you guys once I get the wheels and tires back on it. But for the most part, we are finished here in the back, other than torquing some stuff that we need to torque. It's definitely lower. So here's what I'm gonna do, guys. I went ahead and zip tied the e-brake cable to the panhard rod. I did run the air line. I drilled a small hole in the black plastic in the back. You'll see it here in a minute, but what I'm going to do now is set you guys up on the tripod while I set this thing down on the ground, and it should be pretty much dragging in the back. Hopefully we didn't go too low, but we'll just have to see. Anyway, let's get the jacks out from under, or jack stands out from under it, and the jack, and then we're gonna have to position it on my stands in order to get the torque settings where we want them before we move to the front. I don't know, maybe we should just leave it. Man, it looks different, doesn't it? Holy cow. Like I said, guys, I don't know, that may be too low. I'm going to put a little bit of air in the bags real quick just to see how much difference it makes. Then we'll go from there. Well, I'm gonna move it over here to start on the front. I may even move it over here to start torquing down the back. I need my trailer on that side. So anyway, it looks cool. Well, I changed my mind. I've got my stands under there. But let's look under here and let's talk about what we need to do next, because we need to torque some stuff. Obviously, it's just all loose right now, and we need to get torque specs on some of this stuff under here. I wanted to show you too where I put my valve. I went ahead and put 20 psi in the bags. I don't know if you can, probably can't even see them at this point. Yeah, it's tough to see them now. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to torque. So the shocks, top and the bottom of the shocks, need to go to 85 foot-pounds. So we'll get the 21 millimeter and do that, because remember, we're using the stock bolts, top and bottom. The control arm, or the lower control arm that we had to relocate and move, this guy goes to 74 foot-pounds plus 55 degrees. That's the best torque spec I could find in all the manuals that I have. So we're going to go ahead and torque that. You can see, you know, we want weight on the suspension when we do all this. So that's what we're doing. And then for the upper and lowers here, as far as the sway bar end links, we're going to go to 37 on those. And then we're going to go to 60 on the panhard rod. But before we do that, we need to make some adjustments. So I've loosened the jam nut here. We need to loosen the one on the other side. I haven't done that. I did zip tie this line. Obviously, you can see that. And then I'm probably, guys, I'm going to have to bend this back a little bit. I noticed that it's touching. And so I'm going to have to bend the holder either in or out or backwards, somewhere where it's out of the way. But that'll get our torque specs. I'll kind of show you how I'm going to adjust this, because it's an on-car adjustment. And so what you'll do is you'll loosen the jam nuts on both sides, but there's more to it. So let's get this stuff torqued first, and then we'll move on to how we're going to adjust the panhard rod. Now that we got all that torqued down, we need to set the adjustable panhard rod. So we loosen both the jam nuts, and the center adjustment link either lengthens or shortens that. So what generally happens, guys, is when you lower one, it pushes the rear end out to one side or the other. So here's what we've got, and it's just something that I've made and I've had for years. I've actually set every panhard rod up with it. But what I do is I tape almost a plumb bob, is what it's called, in the middle of the upper rear quarter, kind of lined up at the center of the wheel. So what we're going to do is, there's not a lot here. We're gonna wait till it goes steady, and we've got, what, between a quarter and 3/16 right there is where we're at. So what we need to do is go to the other side, and I've got the exact same setup on the other side. We need to measure it, and as you can see, we've got, it looks to me like we've got a little more. Yeah, so the rear end needs to come towards the driver's side. So in order to do that, we need to get under there, and I'm going to show you what we need to do. So generally what would happen, because we want to push it towards the driver's side, we would need to shorten this, I believe. So what you'll have to do is experiment with turning this once the jam nuts are loose. Make a couple turns, go out and measure again, and we want those to be equal on both sides. So we want the rear end to set right in the middle of both of those. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make the adjustment. So I turn down, we'll go check, and if that works, then we'll lock these jam nuts down. If it does not, then we will adjust it again until we get where we need, and then we'll lock the jam nuts down. So just kind of wanted to give you guys a quick how to adjust this. It's not really hard, guys. You're just basically using measurements off the body. The other thing I'm going to do while I'm down here doing all this is I'm going to go ahead and put grease in the panhard and the upper and lower of the sway bar end links. Everything's torqued. Panhard rod is locked down. The jam nuts are locked. It's set. I've got grease in all my fittings. I'm going to put one more zip tie on this, just because I want to go around that metal, this old metal sleeve, but I wanted to adjust it first. So now that it's adjusted, I'm going to put this around there. And the last thing we need to do, guys, is if you're using these shocks like I am, the initial setting when you get them out of the box is all the way counterclockwise. So I back that off 12 clicks, which is what I did on my truck. Seems to be the best ride quality. If you want it to go stiffer, then you would go counterclockwise. If you want it softer, you would go clockwise. And there should be 24 clicks within that. Now have it turned around, as you can see. I actually took it down the road and no issues. It actually rode pretty decent, no rubbing. Kind of exciting. And it's pretty low, as you can see. So let's see what we can do with the front. So as you can see, we got it jacked up. We got it supported by jack stands both sides. Actually, I have a jack on both sides too. It just makes it easier in my opinion. But the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a 36 millimeter. We're going to take this guy loose. Once we do that, we're going to mess with the brake and the brake caliper bracket. So the caliper itself and the caliper bracket. This should be a 19 to get the caliper off the bracket, and then an 18 to get the caliper bracket off the spindle. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to whip all this out off camera here. I'm going to get the 10 millimeter out that holds this, and there's a 10 millimeter that holds the brake line and the ABS line. So we'll pop this out of its little holder and probably unplug it up there as well. So we'll get all that stuff knocked out on both sides. Now that we got that apart, you can see I got the 10 millimeters out, and the brake is hanging back here because I didn't want to put stress on the line. We're not replacing the line, so I didn't want to have any issues. So I've got it hanging there. And you can also see I've turned the wheel, just gives you a little better access. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this T30 out that holds the brake rotor in place. We're going to get it out of the way. Maybe I have to use two hands. Get this out of the way, and then I'm going to go ahead and use a 15. I've sprayed, you can see it looks oily in here. I sprayed some WD-40 on the tie rod end, which should be a 15 millimeter, and I've also sprayed it on the bottom of the struts. Those are 15 millimeter as well. They'll have to access through the bottom. Same way with this, the 15 comes up from the bottom. You'll need an open end or a closed end wrench to hold the top. So we'll get those things out of the way, and then we should be able to, I'm probably going to take the CV shafts out, just because these are 18 millimeter, on the older ones they're 15, and so because of that the head is really big, and you can't really get the bolt in there like you normally could. So we're gonna take those out, but I think I'm gonna take the 15 millimeters. There are 6 of them that hold the CV shaft up there, and so I think I'll do that as opposed to fighting with trying to get these out with a closed-in wrench. Now that you can see, I don't know if you can see back there, but I got those 15 millimeters out that hold the axle in. I'm ready to get the strut completely loose. We've got the 15s loose in the bottom, but now we need to get the 18s up top. So there's a couple methods here of doing this. You can use a ratcheting wrench right here through this opening, or you can pop the hood, and most of the time you have access to the 18s there. Now I will tell you that every one of these right here has something wiring wise on top of it, so I'm going to pop those off with my little tool here, and then once we get those out of the way, we'll be able to use the 18 to get those out. Once that's loose though, guys, we should be able to push the strut out, or at least I'm hoping so, pushing the bottom of it in that opening here and pulling the top either this way or just threading it all the way through. Now, not only was I able to get the strut out there by doing that, I was able to push that plastic tray down and get our CV shaft out. So sometimes you got to tap this, but generally just loosening it will get it, unless it's been there a long time. Just push the center out, push the other end down, and it comes out through that opening back in the back. So now we're going to move on to getting the tie rod, the upper tie rod. Oh, what this is all about? Looks like they hit something. The upper tie rod, which is an 18, I believe the stock lower is a 24, and then I believe this is a 21. So if it's different, we need to go ahead and knock all of those loose, and then we should be able to get the spindle. Well, actually, I'll tell you what, I may turn the wheel now and try to go ahead and get those 18 millimeters out and get this guy out of the way first, actually. Next thing we're gonna do is take 24, 18, 21 out. We're gonna have to wrap on this thing with a hammer to get this out of here. And I do not have a deep 24, so I have to use a regular 24 and just back it off a little. You got the 24 out. Now there's no pressure on this, so if you knock around on it and it comes loose, it's not gonna fly out and hit you like the older style ones. Uh-oh, this one's, of course it's stuck. So we'll have to get a wrench and hold the bottom of it to get it out. But then the 18 up top should be able to loosen it. by hand, hopefully. And then we'll get the spindle out of the way. I'm gonna go ahead and also take the 18s out back here that hold this guy in. Let's see if we can knock those out real quick, because we need this out of the way. It obviously is gonna transfer to the new spindle. I got those bolts loose, and I don't remember if I've used this ring before or not. It has this ring that kind of holds all these. I don't remember. I'll have to look in the instructions with the new Beltec spindles. But once we get that out, sometimes this thing likes to be a pain, but looky there. That one's gonna be easy. I'm really confused. They hit something because there's a bunch of like what looks like hair wrapped up in the front of this thing. So let's grab the hammer here, I guess. Go ahead and take this 18 off, and then I forgot I gotta get this off. Then we'll hit it here. I don't want to use a pickle fork. I don't want to mess up these ball joints because I already took the other side apart and they're good. So no sense in wrecking them. Otherwise you're gonna have to replace them. And when you use a pickle fork, generally you screw up the rubber bushings, or the boots, I mean. So let me get this undone, and then we'll knock around on this and see if we can get it loose. Got that loose now, and generally, yeah, they come loose pretty easy. Now I don't have any bolts in the spindle, top or bottom, so as we start to hit this, it may fall off on the ground. Sometimes it takes a little bit. But it'll eventually come off. Now this is an aluminum spindle, I noticed. So they generally don't hold on as hard. I think we're getting close there. That one sounded different. There we go. Top's out. When it does come, like I said, it's going to hit the floor. Just like that. All right, so what we need to do is we need to grab the new spindle, and the reason why we need to grab the new spindle and put it up in place with nothing else is because we're gonna have to lop off part of this in order to make this fit with the four-wheel drive. There's just no way around it. So we're gonna have to cut that. So what I like to do is put the spindle up into place, go ahead and run this bolt tight, and then we know how much we can knock off of it and still be able to put it back together. Now here's what normally happens when you do this. This wants to spin, so I generally grab a clamp like this that you use for brakes, or I use for brakes. Clamp that together, and that'll keep your ball joint from spinning, so you can go ahead and run this down snug. And then I'm gonna bring you guys in closer and show you exactly what I'm gonna cut, because we're gonna have to make clearance for that CV axle. If you're doing a two-wheel drive, which I actually was looking for a two-wheel drive when I bought this, but you don't have to do this because there's nothing here in the middle for it to hit, and definitely makes life easier. Let me grab the light, and I'm gonna bring you guys in and show you what I'm gonna do. So you can see here what I'm talking about, the bottom of this ball joint, so the upper ball joint, that would hit the CV boot. So what we're gonna do is, it says in the book or the instruction manual to trim 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Here's what I do, guys. I knock this off flush with this nut. That's what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna use my cutoff wheel and my DeWalt cordless grinder, and we're gonna cut that off smooth. Then we can take it back apart, and we'll get our spindle here hooked up to it, and we'll continue once I get that cut. I wanted to show you, I just used an old actual cutoff wheel, but you can see what I'm talking about. Nice and flush. Now we can take this back apart. Now we need to assemble this, and we are using that ring, so it's a little odd, but we're putting it together the same way it came apart. We're just gonna set this on here like this. Remember that your ABS comes out the front, right? And then sets up here. We're gonna have to trim this, by the way, but we'll worry about that later. And you do reuse the ring. So the ring that was on it. And guys, here's the deal. These go to 133 foot-pounds. I'm gonna zap them with my impact, and then I'm gonna have to have somebody come out here and hold it while because it's gonna wanna spin, just to make sure that they go to 133. So for now, I'm just gonna hit them with the impact, and then I'll torque them off camera to 133 foot-pounds. That's what they need to go to. And then we're gonna move on to assembling the struts, because I think it'll make my life a little easier if we do that next. I'm gonna try to put the struts in and the CV boot back in, and then we'll put the spindle on last. Hopefully we can kind of thread it all together as we're going in. At least that's the plan anyway. We'll see if that works. Now we need to put our upper and lowers together. So what I'm gonna do is, we're gonna start with, obviously, the front strut. There is a plastic pellet in here that you can remove. It's just for shipping. And I did go ahead and put the 7mm in there that's supposed to be. And we're gonna use 2 of these. So we got 2 of those, and we're gonna thread this thing on here. Now, for the top, we need to turn this thing all the way clockwise. That's the firmest setting. And then we're gonna take a T15. We've got to take, or sorry, a T10, and while we're holding that, we're going to take this loose, because otherwise we can't get the top of it on. Set it to the side, and then we can get our spring, set it on. Now I'm going to thread this all the way down to the bottom. Once we get that on, we can put our top hat on. Oh, I take that back. We need 2 more of these. Then our top hat. And then there is a ring right here, and it's tangled up, but this guy right here is gonna snap over the top to retain all this together. Now obviously we're gonna have to run this up to get some pressure on it. So we need to do that with both of these guys. You can see how it's gonna set. Once we get that done, then we can go ahead and put our adjuster, well actually we could just go ahead and put our adjuster sleeve back on now, I guess. And it only goes one way, it's keyed. So we'll get it back on and get it tightened up, and then I'll snug these up. Now I've adjusted the preload all the way up. So I spun these guys until they are all the way to the top. So honestly guys, I hope that it's not too low right here, because I can't go any farther up. That would be the downside. But anyway, we're moving on to the hardware. So this is all the hardware for the upper mounting. You're gonna have 3 bolts that hold the top in. So this is gonna replace your old top mount where the 18mm were. Obviously you got a bolt to hold this guy to this. And then the same thing on the bottom. You'll have a bracket. Now, what you will have also are these little aluminum sleeves that you saw on the back. Those guys set in there like that. And so you could, and the instructions actually show this, you could go ahead and do this, put this together. I'm gonna try to go actually out. Probably not a bad idea to put it together. This little notch, by the way, faces out. And you want your, you'll also want your adjustment knob facing out, if that makes sense. Now on the bottom, I'm gonna put this in the truck, and then we'll put the bolt in afterwards. But you get the idea here. Go ahead and get that started. And I think they tell you this because it's probably really hard to get that in place, get the bolt in. You may be able to. I was able to on my other truck, get that in after, so I mounted this first, and then these are gonna go through and come up through the top. But I was able to mount this first. I may try that and let you guys know if you can do with or without that. But this guy, we're gonna put that in the truck next. So after testing, it does make the most sense to go ahead and put this together and then put it up in the truck. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna put the bottom on also. And so essentially you want that cutaway facing forward, your adjustment knob facing forward. Sorry, it's a lot of frame. And then this actually sets in here with this in the middle and this piece right here, the longer piece over the back. So we're gonna go ahead and get the sleeves in here and get the bolt in. And then guys, before I actually put this in, what I'm going to do is we're gonna put the CV boot back into place, because I think it'll, to me, it makes a little more sense to do it that way. I don't know, you could go ahead and we may go ahead and put that in first actually, and then put the CV boot in, and then we're gonna put the spindle all up in at one time. But for now, let's go ahead and put this up into place and get the bolts started on top. You're gonna have separate bolts for the bottom and the top, which they're separated out in the packaging. So we'll get that put in and snug down, and then we'll get our CV boot in and get it started. Now that we've got this put into place, make sure your bolts on the bottom are facing down and the ones on top are facing up. We need to torque all this. The cool thing about this is because of the bearing in here, we don't have to wait and put a load on the suspension to torque this. So what I'm going to do is we're going to torque the top to 50 foot-pounds, and that's these guys. They should be 5/8. The bottom, however, is 9/16. Those go to 45. And then the through bolt that goes through the strut, those go to 75. Now we've got everything torqued, 75, like I said, on the top and the bottom, the big long bolt that goes through, 45 on the bottom, and 50 on the top. So now we're gonna move on. Like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and put our CV shaft back in. And guys, I'm just gonna loosely start those 15 millimeters by hand, just making sure that it's in there. We will torque those later when we've got the axle here so we can put a pry bar in, because it wants to spin when you wanna torque those. So let's get that installed, and then we will move on probably to the spindle. Now that we got those loosely threaded in, and yes guys, you can sneak this through. You kind of have to go in between the sway bar and it. So anyway, we're gonna grab our spindle. Now, what we need is our 18 that's gonna go on this. We kind of got to start that first. We're gonna start, well, I say that. We're gonna start this first, get the splines lined up, and as we go in, we're gonna hook the bottom here, and we may have to, lift this up in order to get the top in place. But this guy right here, we're gonna have to start first, because we're gonna have very small amount of room as we're going together. You can see I've kind of got it resting on my lap here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead, since we've got the splines lined up, and put our washer and our 36 millimeter back on. And then at the same time I'm doing all that, we're gonna attempt to get this started, which, like I said, it's kind of doing it blind. There we go. It started, and then we're also, at the same time we're doing all this, gonna reach down and put the bottom one on as well, get it started. So now all of them are started. We're gonna have to pinch this down. This top one gets torqued to 37, bottom one to 92, and this we'll have to torque after it goes to 177. We'll torque that at the end once the wheel's on the ground, but we can use our impact and at least run it down. Now that we've got the bottom torque to 92, the top to 37, we're gonna move on, guys. We've got majority of the stuff here in place, but we need to cut something here. This guy right here needs to be cut, and the reason why is it fits on top of the spindle here. So normally it would set like, kind of like this up top. That's exactly how it sets, actually. But because of the new drop, it won't. The spindle moves up, so the brake's in the way. So what we need to do is we need to cut this off right here. So we need to get rid of this ear so it sets there and doesn't interfere with the brake. Just a quick pass with my grinder, the cutoff wheel, and we are good to go. Same cutoff wheel that we used earlier. There's like an indention in here for this to set And I had my, the 10 millimeter, make sure that you kept it from the other spindle. We need to go ahead and snug that guy down. Sometimes the aftermarket spindle is kind of snug as far as the 10 millimeters go, I've noticed. So just make sure you're not cross-threading. I've snapped some of these off in the past. Once we get that tight, this goes to 106 inch-pounds if you want to get something out to measure it. I generally don't, I just tighten it down until I'm comfortable. Same thing with the other piece that goes to the brake. So we're square there, now we can hook this back in. And I'm going to grab the brakes, go ahead and get them installed. We're gonna put the rotor on and then the caliper and caliper bracket, and then I'll come back and talk about torque specs on that. I like to have the ability to turn this. That's the reason I'm not putting on the tie rod in right now. So we've got this back in, that's 106 inch-pounds too, just so you guys know. Brakes are on. The brake caliper bracket goes to the Beltec instructions, so 130. The actual real one is 144 from the factory. Then the guide bolts, the 19 millimeters, those go to 74. And then you can see that I've hooked my line back up and the safety lock and got it all back in all the holders. The 10 millimeter back here that holds the brake line. And the only thing I didn't show you guys here is I did put the sway bar end link in, but I'm not gonna tighten that down until I get the other side complete. So the last thing we need to do on this side, obviously we're gonna have to torque down those bolts for the CV shaft on the inside, but we need to get this installed, and it's probably gonna spin on you, so you're gonna have to hold it, but this goes to 44 foot-pounds. So everything for the most part is tight, other than, like I said, this is gonna go to 177. I'll have to leave the center of the wheel out. We need to tighten those 15 millimeters for the CV axle, so the flange in there, to 57. In order to do that, I'm gonna have Cohen here hold this right here. If you can put it a little lower to the ground, you can do it by yourself, but if you have somebody to help, that's definitely beneficial. 57 is not real tight. Aside from that, I did go ahead and snug up the sway bar. Generally, you want to snug it up until the center doesn't spin. There's no real torque spec for that. And then we need to align our old pieces up top. You know, we don't have the 18 millimeter nut on the top anymore, but we do have studs that we can at least slip the wire holders back onto, making sure they stay out of the way. Now, after we do all that, we're gonna have to set it down on the ground, but before I do that, we need to back this off 12 clicks, just like we did in the back, and that'll give us a good starting point. And then we're gonna have to set it down, and oh, one other thing, the adjuster sleeve down here on the bottom, do not forget to tighten down that 6 millimeter before you set it down on the ground. It's on the back, which is kind of cumbersome to get to, but look, you know, that's just how it is. So hopefully we don't have to lift this thing up, because I am threaded all the way up to the top of that strut or the spring. So let's finish these little things up. We'll get the wheels on, and we'll set it down and let you guys take a look. We got them on. So we're gonna take the jack out from under. We'll see what it looks like. Oh, that's not good. That's not good at all. Oh gosh. That's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. The spring is pushed up as far as it'll go, so I can't put any more in it. I'm only getting drop now. That's not gonna work. Ah, this is a bummer. Wow, believe me, I love the look of it. I think this looks kind of cool. It's undrivable. Like, it's not on bags, but it looks like it's on bags. I need to close the hood. Go ahead and push the hood down the rest of the way so we get the normal look. Yeah, this is not gonna work. And here's the deal. I'm thinking, I got two options. I can put the stock strut back in the front, which I don't really want to because I want the ride quality of the RideTech. Or I could put the stock spindle back in and bring it back up. Because I don't know that I've ever seen one get this low with a spring and a spindle. So I'm going to talk to RideTech and see what they say about it. But ultimately, we're going to have to do something different. This is definitely not going to work. The back right now, guys, with this setting on the ground without moving anything, the back's about 33 3/4. The front's at like 30 or 31. So that, I mean, if we took the spindles out, if it's a 2-inch drop spindle and we took it out and we brought that up 2 inches, that'd be about right. The only downside with that is the amount of camber this thing has in it. I won't really know until I do that. If that will fix the camber. I mean, look, ultimately you can adjust some of the camber out, but I don't know if you could see the way that wheel's laid back. We're gonna have a time getting that out. So we're just gonna have to see, you know, kind of what I come up with, but it does look cool. Well, like I said, it's obvious this isn't gonna work. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take the struts out that we put in, and RideTech has supplied me a new top piece, which I'm gonna show you guys how to replace that and what I'm talking about. But first, we need to get this thing off the ground if I can even get a jack under it. I mean, there's probably an inch between the lower valance and the ground here. Looks cool, looks bagged, right? But undrivable, that won't work. So let's get the struts out of there, or the shocks, whatever you want to call them, and or coilovers, and we'll go from there. Now, guys, remember what I said. I got these adjusted all the way until there was no more thread on the coilover itself, on the coilover body. And so I can't go any higher. And so what RideTech has sent me are new tops. So basically we need to disassemble this. And when I say a new top, this guy up here, they are interchangeable for different options as far as shocks and struts and fitments. And so what I did was I called them, I put these in, we measured, I gave them the measurements of what it was setting at, and I gave him measurements of how far up it needed to come. And he said the shocks are the right size and the spring is the right size. So what you need to do is we need to replace this top piece. So I'm gonna attempt to show you guys how to do that. But in order to do that, we do have to disassemble, take this stuff off. And we're gonna need to get a flat blade to get this loose. And then guys, I'm gonna go ahead and take the T15 out as well. Now, before I take the T15 out, I wanted to make sure that I got it all the way tightened clockwise. So now we'll get it off there while we're holding it. Get it out of the way. Set it to the side for now. And then the only thing we have left to do is we need to get this snap ring off, which I may have to grab. I've got a pick here and I think I'll be able to do it with that, but it may take me a minute. Yeah, I may have to grab something a little thicker than this. This is just wanting to slide around. If I could get under it with a flat blade, once I got it picked open like that, I think we'll be able to pop it off there. It's good that it's this snug. Yeah, I'm gonna go grab another flat blade. We'll get that off there, and then we'll be able to get our ring out of place. And then I'm gonna show you what we have to do in order to replace this. This actually just screws on to the top, but it does have, they use red Loctite on there to keep them from, you know, spinning off. Now our next step is to put it into this tool that RideTech supplied me. And so you can see we got the snap ring off. So what we need to do is, I may have to loosen this a little more. Should work. And we need to tighten this down to 50 foot-pounds. That should ensure that that won't spin. I'll push it back up here in a second. And then guys, what we're gonna do is we're gonna just kind of heat this area right here, trying to loosen up some of that red Loctite that they have. And hopefully that will get it accomplished. Now that we got it snug down in here, what we're gonna do is just gradually heat this You don't have to get crazy. What we're trying to do is just loosen up that Loctite that they put in there from when they assembled them. And then I'm going to try to use a screwdriver, a bigger screwdriver on the top. You could use a crow's foot, probably on the top side here if you wanted. We're going to attempt to use the screwdriver first and see what happens. Good news is we don't have to heat it to go back on. Let's see if that's enough. I feel like it's probably not, but oh, well. And believe me guys, that's gonna be warm. So that's not as bad as I thought. It's warm down there at the bottom. I can feel the heat, but should be able to just pop it off here and move it. There we go. And now we need to go grab the new one and you'll be able to see the difference. Now that we got that off there, I'm gonna use a little bit of brake clean and just clean these threads. See if we can get out the old red Loctite that's in there. You don't have to go crazy here, but. And then we're gonna apply some new Loctite, but before we do that, I did adjust mine. I talked to one of the Ride Tech engineers and he said adjust it to at least a half or open where maybe no threads are showing on the inside of like this guy. That's still pretty warm. So let me go grab them and you can see the difference side by side. You can obviously see the difference between the two now. Obviously a lot higher. And then we have a different hat to go on the top. I'll show you guys that once we're going back together. But for now, let's go ahead and put a little red Loctite on this. And we need to put this guy on and torque it to 50 foot-pounds. And I'm gonna use a crow's foot in the corner to accomplish that. Shouldn't be too bad. Which is nice, my torque wrench is already set to 50. Now that we got that accomplished, we're gonna go ahead and take it out. We are gonna have to take, this guy off. I'm gonna have to run that out a little further. We're gonna have to take the plastic adjustment knob off, obviously to get our snap ring back in place, but we're going back together the exact same way we came apart. Make sure that your bump stop, by the way, is out of the way. You don't want to melt that when you're getting these things hot, but now I just need to duplicate that on the other one. Now that we have them both assembled, we need to do reassembly, I suppose, but before we do that, we need to get this guy off. And I want to show you guys the difference. I mean, you know how to put them together at this point, but I want to show you the difference in the hats, or at least what I'm talking about is a hat. That's what I call it. So the new ones that he supplied me gives about another 3/4 of an inch of adjustment, because remember, we were all the way threaded up the shaft here. And so this guy, in comparison to the one we had before, look at the difference, okay? So now we're gonna have even more room to maneuver. So we need to get these guys put on and put our spring on. And of course we need to put the bottom back on just like it was before. Make sure that 4mm is loose, this 4mm here, or 6mm maybe. But once we get this reassembled, put our ring back on and our adjustment knob, we're gonna put it back in the truck, torque it to the 75 that it was at before, and we're gonna give us some adjustment. Now, one thing, guys, I will tell you is I'm adjusting this. We can set preload now, so I'm adjusting this up until it stops, and then going just a hair further, and I'm making it equal on both sides. So what I'm hoping to do is back it off or bring it up a little bit in the truck, but this will give me a starting point where we're equal, and maybe I can just count the turns and we can go on measurements after that. But we'll get this reassembled and back in the truck, and the next thing I'll show you will be it setting back on the ground. Now, before I set it on the ground, like I said, I'm gonna probably turn these up maybe 4 times or so, and then we'll have to put the wheels on it. This will be kind of a trial and error deal, trying to find where we want to fine tune it. But once we get it set to wherever we're going to spin it to, we need to make sure and snug that guy up that crimps this together. I got it set on the ground with the first adjustment. I went to 2 7/16. with the off the truck, and then I went 4 equal turns on both sides. And guys, it's definitely drivable now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run it up the road. We're gonna pull it back in, see how much it settles, because I know it's not all the way down. I think it'll settle some. We still have quite a bit of adjustment up, so that's good. This is way better. But we'll see kind of how it rides at the same time. I'm not putting that much into that right now because we're still working on the height. Okay guys, we've got it out of the garage. It has actually been aligned. We have been driving it for about a week and no issues whatsoever. It actually is the best ride out of anyone I've ever done. I contributed, it's gotta be the shocks, guys. Look, you know, we've used, and nothing wrong with the Beltec stuff because we've used it a lot in the past, but I just, like I said, when I did my truck, I wanted something that kind of was a step above. You know, you're just run-of-the-mill, a whole set of shocks for one of these through Beltec's $300. And while they've served their purpose in the past, I wanted to try something different to see if we could get a better ride. And it by far is a better ride. Now, is there other stuff out there that may do better? I don't know yet, guys. I'd like to try a Viking maybe down the road. I've got these set just at the initial setting, the 12 clicks back, which is what RideTech recommends to start with. And it's a little softer, but I like a little softer ride. You can always firm it up by tightening it back. But all in all, I am happy. Obviously, guys, I love the look of it. And I've got my measurements right here, if you were wondering, because I tried this 6-inch, so-called 6-inch spring on the back. It's an eBay part, and it's the only one I could get, to be honest with you guys. So we started in the front, driver's side front, we started at 35 and 11/16. We are now at 32.5. Passenger side front, we started at 35 and 13/16. We are now at 32.5. So it's dead on, square, side to side. And then same thing in the back, guys. We started on the driver's side rear at 37 3/4. We are now at 39 or 33 and 9/16. And then the passenger side rear, we started really high, 38 and 3/16. It looked ginormous over here. It is now 33 and 9/16. So it is completely level as far as like all the way around, so side to side anyway. Obviously we've got a little bit of a rake front to back, but that is perfect, guys. It's a little bit more than what I would like to have, so I may so I've already had it aligned, so I'm not going to crank the front up anymore. We do get a little bit of dragging backing up lock to lock, and going forward, if there's a little bit of a transition, sometimes lock to lock, we get a little dragging on the inner fender liners, but nothing bad. And we're still running the same tire. I'll list all the tires and the wheels down in the description down below. I don't think you can get the wheels anymore, but the tire size is pretty common, 295, 35, 24. So, sorry guys, the motorcycle's out. It's a nice day. I actually just got through washing this. So, all right, so if you're wanting to know like total drop, so we went down 3 and 3/16 on the driver's side front, 3 and 5/16 drive or passenger side front, 4 and 3/16 on the driver's side rear, and almost 5 inches on this side. So ultimately, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm sure everybody's gonna say, hey, it's a 4-wheel drive, why would you lower it? That's because that's what we do, guys. I absolutely love the look of it. It performs just like any other 4-wheel drive. We never had any issues with getting stuck in the snow. We don't get a ton of snow, but I've had these things lowered, and you can just push snow at that bottom balance. It literally doesn't affect it whatsoever. But I will trade that off for the ease of getting a baby seat in and out of the back, for one thing. My wife is shorter, so it's easier for her to get in and out. And well, guys, you can't argue with the look, or at least in my opinion. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please, like always, smash that thumbs up button. If you are not subscribed, go down there, hit that subscribe button. While you're down there doing all that, go check out twamotorsports.com, pick you up some merch, a hat, a shirt, a sticker, doesn't matter. And stay tuned, guys, to see what we work on next.